Hey guys, it's Malthus here once again, and quite recently I've taken to trying to make a pure Flicker Strike build. Now historically Flicker Strike builds, such as what you're seeing right here, is something you need to really have a separate single target for, or swap a few gems around so that you can actually damage bosses, especially the ones that are a lot tankier than usual. In this current instance though, I am trying to have a pure sustain of Flicker, as well as some Ancestral Warchief, and through that we are using Terminus Est. Terminus Est is one of the current 3 ways that you can really sustain Flicker Strike, the other being Auros and Raider Ascendancy. Those are the best ways to purely sustain Frenzy charges for your Flicker Strike to keep going. Now if you're unfamiliar with what Flicker Strike is or does, this absolute Kaioken Dragon Ball Z clusterfuck in the background is what Flicker Strike is. It is basically your movement skill of Flicker Strike attached to Multi-Strike and Melee Splash, which consumes a Frenzy charge to get rid of its 2-second cooldown, and then let you Flicker Strike once again, thus teleporting all over the map with its auto-targeting system and just turning into a complete who the fuck knows what, Jesus take the wheel type of build. Now this current character is focused around Terminus Est, which is a level 51 2-hand unique sword. Doesn't have an amazing amount of DPS, but has a high amount of crit and gives you Frenzy Charge on critical strike. So the idea is to then try and get as much crit as possible, so you have a reliable steady stream of crits, turning into frenzies and then Flicker Strikes, and using an Abyssus so that we can actually add quite a bit of damage to the Terminus Est and the build through the added Fizz and the crit multi, which then means we take a shitload of extra damage. So I'm a Slayer so that I can prevent quite a bit of that reflected damage coming back at me, as well as getting plenty of leech from the Ascendancy of Slayer. Now as I did mention, this is supposed to be a pure Flicker Strike type of character where you don't swap into any other skill, and that is a bit challenging on its series, especially because Multi-Strike kind of has a mind of its own. So we have to take out Multi-Strike and then simply attack with just plain old Flicker Strike and replace it with Ruthless. So you can see on its theory it still hits insanely hard, but it's less uncontrollable when you take Multi-Strike out, and then hopefully this will bring us into a bit of uber viability when we get to that stage, though I'm still a little skeptical on how well I can control it when something doesn't die immediately. So you build up a few Frenzy Charges with the Frenzy Charge attack if you need to, and then unleash with the Frenzy, and hopefully it sustains at that point. Now you can imagine this playstyle and character is not for everyone, and a lot of people say they just get a headache or sick from watching it or even playing it, but historically a lot of people do say that it's a lot harder to watch than it is to play, and by playing it personally I have absolutely no issues with headaches or, you know, following the character or the screen or whatever, and I personally don't have any problems watching it either, but that is certainly not the case for everyone. Now it just goes all over the screen, and it's a pretty fast playstyle, probably one of the fastest melee type builds available at the absolute top end of a character like this. And this is roughly the playstyle, just for the what a map clear looks like. You leap slam a lot, and I do want to now go over what the character entails as far as building it with gear and the plan for it initially and how it's actually unfolding at this point. So this is the character. It's a currently level 86 duelist called Heh Nothing Personal Kid, which is just some neckbeard meme. If you're not familiar with it, don't worry about it. And the character, I do kind of want to talk a little bit about my micro combination here, because I'm pretty fond of what I've put together, and I think it looks really nice on the duelist here. We have the Celestial Weapon effect, though sometimes we go with the Oriath Weapon effect, because you may see throughout the video that it leaves a nice trail when actually attacking with your Flicker Strike, and thus looks really nice while flickering. So sometimes we run that, but currently Celestial Weapon effect a lot of the time, and otherwise just, you know, some other Celestial Hood, Demonic Wings, the Eyes, and something a lot of people have been asking me about is the armor. It's Journeyman Body Armor, which is from a old supporter pack like a couple years ago or something, so it's no longer available for purchase anymore, unfortunately, but you can supplement it with something different, like a Gloom, for example. Still looks pretty good, and plenty of other things anyway. And then lastly, Ultimate Chaos character effect, as well as my 2 Wallabies. So that's now the important stuff is out of the way. Let's get to, you know, little nitpicking stuff. The sword we are building around is Terminus Est, which is historically not too amazing or popular. It was buffed a few patches ago to be pretty damn nice with its crit and damage. So it's a solid damaging weapon, but it's a bit low on the endgame scale for its damage. However, it gives Frenzy Charge on crit, has a high amount of crit for this type of weapon, and then you can, what I'm trying to do anyway, is supplement it with the Abyssus for the extra physical damage, bringing it up a notch, especially with its fast attack speed, and the crit multi, and then trying to get decent amount of fizz damage from rings and amulet, so that it's less of a shit weapon and a bit more of a tanky sort of or big swinging two-hander. And so that's the main item we're currently building around, because Flicker Strike, as I mentioned, is just a movement skill or attack. Deals a lot of damage, but it has a 2-second cooldown. So when you attach it to multi-strike and melee splash, it becomes more of a clear skill, because it then attacks 3 times instead of the 1, and then melee splash turns into an area, and then you get a reliable source of frenzies. So every time you consume a frenzy, it gets rid of the cooldown, and that means you can keep attacking as long as you keep having frenzies. So that's the way a Flicker Strike works. And the other links in the build at the moment are Brutality, Melee Fizz, and Crit Strikes, because we need some sort of reliable critical strike chance to get our frenzies back, and I don't really have too much on the tree. Just here, here, and here, and overall that gives us 52 crit without our golem, and 55 with the golem at the moment. So nothing too impressive, but it's enough to sustain most of the time. And like I mentioned, I went with Slayer to begin with because I knew I'd be wearing an Abyssus, and thus Headsman paired with the Yugal Minor God Prophecy is our reflect protection, and it still hurts quite a fucking bit on the character, even though I'm running a base ult, a Granite Flask from Lion's Roar, and also almost permanent Fortify with Leap Slam and Frenzy going around almost all the time. Reflect still can hurt quite a bit, though at this point I think with the cast when damage taken a Mortal Coil, on top of all of that, Reflect does not seem to be doing too much. So bear that in mind, that you need pretty much all of these defensive tools together with all the armor and all that to then negate Reflect at the higher end of game when you start wearing an Abyssus. So before that, it may start hurting quite a bit, so make sure you take those preventative measures to negate the Reflect. Now besides that, the gear we're rocking is a Combs Roots with +1 Frenzy Charges, so just a bunch of life there. They're very good for not being able to be frozen, temp chains, chilled grounded, all of that shit. Pretty convenient there. Don't really need the Unwavering Stance since we have stun immunity here anyway whenever we're leeching. And then just pretty standard gear everywhere else. So life, fizz, crit multi, managed to Essence of Contempt spam this steel ring, which is very quite nice because we do need a chunk of int so that you can use the increased crit strike gem, so you need int somewhere on the build. And then just a ring with some fizz, life, and some attack speed, and then reduce flask charges, life, strength, bit of resist if you can get it on a belt. And I started out with a 6-link Astral Plate by going the Celestial Justicar Divination card route. 6 of those cards turns into an Astral 6-link, which is about 26 chaos a piece, I think it was, 28 maybe. Probably the easiest way of getting a 6-link for this type of build. Now besides the Flicker Strike, you do also have Ancestral Warchief to help out with single target damage. He has Maim, Melee Fizz, and Bloodlust attached. A 5th link is probably Brutality, and a 6th link is maybe Ruthless or Conk Effect, something like that. So you put him down whenever you're about to do some single target damage and then flicker over to it. And he does help quite a bit. He's something like 50% of our Flicker Strike damage, so a good 30% of damage overall or so. And then, like I said, Base Ult Flask, increased armor. A Diamond Flask, very important for our sustain. Lion's Roar, bunch of extra damage, and Witchfire, that's what gives us vulnerability. So we don't currently have any mana, as you may have noticed, because I am Blood Magic Spect with the extra life behind it. Now the reason for that is Flicker Strike is kind of a heavy mana costing skill, especially when you attack so fast, and we don't really need our mana to be reserved for anything, since we can get vulnerability from Witchfire, and we're running Brutality, which is more or less just slightly better than having Hatred and a Taste of Hate and some other stuff that you could get, but I've gone the Blood Magic route just to forget about mana altogether and have a fairly comfortable playstyle in that sense, as well as helping fill out some life behind it. Only other thing I think I really should mention is if you've never played Slayer, do not underestimate these nodes. They make your leech and the overkill leech, and then your life regen after that. Completely insane that you can stand around face tanking quite a lot of monsters. I think at my point it ends up being something like 30 to 50% of life regen per second when I have a lot of my leech up. My leech is coming from Blood Rage, and you also combo it with Soul of Arakali, Captured Herald of Thunder. So whenever your Immortal Call goes off with the cast when damage taken, and if you have your Blood Rage up, that means you will stop taking damage over time recently, and you get 50% increased recovery of life, which applies to your leech from the Slayer over time shit as well, thus giving you a huge boost in the leech, and over time you get as a bonus as well. So don't underestimate that, and make sure you do grab this sort of stuff as soon as you can. The leech, like I said, is mostly coming from Blood Rage, but you can get some elsewhere as well. If you can, the more the merrier. It's very useful indeed. You may want to spec into hematophagy. Never actually said that word. You may want to spec into that, or maybe something over here. It's kind of up to you how you build this, I think, but this is currently my tree. I tried to get a few jewel sockets as they're pretty important for damage, you know, crit multi, melee damage, all of that, and I only have one spare frenzy at the moment, so we have 5 frenzies in total if we include the boots. A 6th would be lovely, but 3 points, not sure it's worth it. We'll see how we go. And overall, I will show you the path of building as well, just for the theory craft of the build, which is, I think, exactly the same tree still. Haven't really changed anything except for not grabbing these just yet, because I don't think they will be too necessary. Overall, 210% life on the tree. Should hit something like 6.5k life, hopefully, in the end game. And yeah, this was the theory craft. I thought I'd be using hemophilias. Not sure if I will be, because I really do want life everywhere. And Belt of the Deceiver, I did think I'd be using that as well. But once again, I feel like I kind of want life everywhere, though it's probably worth putting into the build, because Intimidation is a very strong facet of these types of builds. 10% increased damage is nothing to sneeze at, and this is our current just theory crafted Shaper damage. So Flicker Strike at 600 or 600k if we don't include Intimidate, of course, at 600k, and then Ancestral War Tree at about 300k. So something like 1 million Shaper damage sounds good enough to me, and I'll see how it goes when I get there with an actual build and not just a you know, simulation of what's happening over here. So far that is the quick overview of the character, guys. I will link you the gear, passives, and the path of building paste bin if you want in the little build thread afterwards. I hope you enjoyed a little overview on Flicker Strike. If you've never seen it before, it is a very fun skill. There are a few options. The most basic one is probably Oro's Flicker Strike, and I'm sure you can find some guides out for that too. For now, this is what I'm trying. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.